today, and I will turn it over to the Budget Office Director, Jessica Kennard. Jessica, take it away.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good afternoon, Commissioners and Budget Advisors. It's my great pleasure today to be here for our focus on city support services. We will have our first presentation today.
Jessica, we are having some interference with your voice. It sounds like there's static in the background.
Well, I'll see if I can work on that. In the meantime, I'm going to pass it over to our auditor.
Good afternoon. Commissioner Hardesty, it looks like Frida Christopher has her hand up. Would you like to take her question
thank
first?
you.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Yes, Frida.
I'm sorry, I'm fiddling with a brand new computer and it accidentally hit that, so go ahead.
What a way to call out, right? Testing your new equipment.
Yeah.
No worry. No worry. I just wanted to make sure. I appreciate the auditor recognizing your hand. I didn't see it. All these little boxes.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Please take it away.
Okay, we have some slides as well. We'll wait for those to come up.
We can see them.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners, and Community Budget Advisors. I am City Auditor Mary Hull Caballero. I have 3 requests to present today, and we'll start by putting them in the context of the city leadership structure and the role of the Auditor's Office in the organization. Voters elect 6 positions in the City of Portland. The mayor and 4 commissioners have legislative and executive responsibilities. The auditor is the 6th elected official with equal but different responsibilities related to accountability and transparency. In short, the auditor keeps an eye on the other 5 in the commission form of government. You will see a variation of this structure later in the presentation because it's fundamental to one of my requests. 51 employees carry out the work of the Auditor's Office in 5 divisions. They audit, investigate, analyze, and operate on behalf of the public and internal city customers. Operations management, which is in the center of this organizational chart, is especially important to the smooth running of both the Auditor's Office and City Council. Note that this division is home to the Council Clerk, Elections Officer, and the Lobbyist Registration Program, all citywide functions, along with archives and records management. I get asked sometimes why the Auditor's Office employs more people than other elective offices. These council-specific and citywide functions are some of the reasons why. We have 3 items for consideration in our requested budget. The first is to end independent police review. The second is to create an evaluation and investigative services division. And the third is to establish a funding model for the Auditor's Office. Voters decided to end independent police review when they opted for a new accountability system in November. So this request in budget terms is a technicality. The measure's backers said they needed 18 months starting in January 2021 to launch it. In response to their public statements, I have proposed June 30th, 2022 as the day for independent police review to end as a division in the Auditor's Office. As I'll explain in a moment, the decision how to end independent police review is anything but a technicality and presents serious risks for the city. But before we get to that, I want to take a moment to honor the work of the 14 people in independent police review who work every day in service to accountable policing in Portland. They come from diverse professional backgrounds in the law, higher education, criminal justice, auditing, program evaluation, social work, law enforcement, and community engagement. They collectively have 127 years of investigative experience. They handle the most sensitive cases, including complaints against the highest ranking officers in the police bureau, complaints from vulnerable populations, and those that emerge from large events, such as last year's social justice protests. They are analytical and evidence-driven. They see trends in community member interactions with police officers and turn them into policy reviews the Police Bureau can use for systemic change. They called attention to accountability issues in transit policing, arrests of houseless people, equity in officer hiring, and the need to support officers who engage with non-English speaking Portlanders. One report daylighted the need for the Bureau to disclose officers to the District Attorney's Office who had been found to be untruthful. They and their predecessors have sat with thousands of community members in the 20 years of Independent Police Review's existence, listening to their accounts of interactions with officers and gathering evidence related to their allegations. They have interviewed hundreds of officers, wrangled with internal affairs while monitoring the cases it investigates, and observed the investigative procedures of multiple officer-involved shootings. The time for their work to end, however, is on the horizon. Council, you have a choice to make. You can allow Independent Police Review to end chaotically with employee departures, or you can end it with a thoughtful, planned approach that retains its experience, expertise, and institutional knowledge as a public good. The risks involved will materialize soon if it's allowed to end by attrition. So I will do my best to be clear with you and the public about the stakes involved. The downstream consequences from Council's decision last summer to rush a new police accountability system to the ballot have arrived. Voters definitively signaled they wanted a new system, but the public still needs the existing system to function until the new one is operational, and we can't just wish away our settlement agreement with the Justice Department. The city needs to plan to manage the uncertainty and risks presented by this transition. From my perspective, the city needs Independent Police Review staff members to continue taking and investigating police misconduct complaints. It needs them to regain compliance with the timeliness requirements in the settlement agreement. It needs them to ensure a smooth transition from the current system to the new system, or to whatever interim agency may be needed if the new board is not ready by June 2022. If we want a stable transition, we must provide Independent Police Review employees some certainty about their professional and financial futures. If we choose to allow Independent Police Review to erode through employee departures, Council will need an immediate transition plan. I would argue a crisis plan, in anticipation of them drifting away amid the uncertainty and lack of direction in this moment. It is in everyone's interest to have a stable transition, which brings me to my second budget request. I propose creating a new division in my office for evaluation and investigative services, which gradually would be staffed by Independent Police Review employees. This would be a reasonable path through the transition and provide the city an opportunity to increase its analytical capacity for better decision-making. Let me walk you through the timeline to show the overall shift of the employees to the new division. 2 analysts from Independent Police Review would be reassigned on July 1 to begin developing the program and policy evaluation concept. We would engage internally and externally for input, draft city code for council approval, establish data sharing relationships, and explore external revenue sources for cross-jurisdictional projects. Independent Police Review's management team and investigators would continue with their current responsibilities and prepare to transition them to the new accountability board by June 30, 2022. Independent Police Review would end operations at the end of the next fiscal year and then begin work in evaluation and investigative services. This proposal requires no new funding. A bridge will only get us from here to there if it has a foothold on both sides of the divide. On one side, creating an evaluation and investigative services division incentivizes employees to stay in Independent Police Review while the city makes its way to the other side of the transition. Once there, the investment in this new division is worthwhile because it fills a void for independent analytical information and adds a value to the public, especially underserved communities. You are familiar with audits produced by my office. They are meaningful for more efficient, effective, and equitable city government. They deliver recommendations to managers that save money and time and point the way to better programs and services for the public. Audits focus on management performance. Evaluation is different than auditing. Auditors and evaluators share an interest in more efficient, effective, and equitable government, but evolve from different intellectual disciplines. Auditing grew out of accounting and evaluation from the social sciences. Evaluators have wider latitude depending on the question they are trying to answer. They can be about policy options before they are adopted, or about how best to design a program, or whether an intervention delivered a desired result. Government evaluation programs exist at the federal and state level. The Obama administration prioritized their use in its 21st century management agenda, which wanted to rigorously test programs and interventions that were most effective at achieving important goals and scale up those that work the best. The Idaho legislature has Office of Program Evaluations. That office has conducted studies that could be replicated locally, such as the effect of tax preferences on revenue, the effect of state mandates on Portland government, or the city's preparedness for its aging population generally and its workforce specifically. Portland's problems aren't getting less complex or easier to solve. Solutions increasingly require coordination and collaboration across economic sectors and government jurisdictions. Inaction or choosing the wrong intervention can be catastrophic for individuals, communities, neighborhoods, or the planet. Evaluation is well suited for cross-jurisdictional collaboration and data sharing. In the interest of time, you can find more information about the concept for this division and our other requests on the Auditor's Office website. And this brings me to our third request today, which is for council and the auditor to take care of some unfinished business from 2017. As promised, here is the city leadership structure again to provide context for this request. 84% of voters in 2017 approved a charter amendment that reaffirmed the public's expectations for an independent elective auditor's office free from interference from city management. The charter authorized the auditor to engage independent counsel, make human resources decisions, and sign contracts. It also included language that the auditor's budget should be based on the auditor's priorities while acknowledging counsel's fiduciary responsibility. My office has implemented procedures for all its new charter sections with one exception, which is budget setting. I can't meet the voters' expectations in this area without counsel. I used this infographic 4 years ago during council work sessions and meetings to make the case that subordinating the auditor's office to the city attorney, the budget office, and the Office of Management and Finance was an inappropriate structure for an elected accountability office. It depicts layers of city staff and other elected commissioners between the elected auditor and the public. The orange icon on the left represented the mayor directing the budget office to analyze the auditor's requested budget and report back its recommendation to all of the commissioners in charge. The process judged the auditor's budget request against the mayor's criteria. I don't recall the criteria ever prioritizing the accountability and transparency work of the auditor's office, so it was hard to compete on those grounds. If the mayor's criteria directed budget cuts, they applied to the auditor's office, but rarely to any of the other elected offices. City practice meant the mayor's and commissioners' elective offices were funded first and foremost, then their bureaus, while the auditor's office came last. By its vote, the public rejected this model and affirmed its desire to fund the office that makes the city more efficient, effective, and equitable based on the elected auditor's priorities, not those of the mayor and commissioners. Therefore, my final request is that council join me in adopting a funding model that respects the voters' wishes. This is our third attempt for a funding model. We appreciate that council approved one part of last year's two-part request for a framework to set the auditor's budget. That first step created a reserve fund for the auditor's office to retain its underspending at the end of the fiscal year, up to $500,000 to use for one-time expenditures. The first step created a reserve fund. I'm sorry, I just said that. Now we request that council approve the second part of the model, which makes a modest amount of money available to the auditor's office each year above its base budget. The amount is a percentage that translates into less than $200,000 annually. Working together, the model sets a cap that the auditor's office must operate within. Now I'm going to introduce Business Operations Manager Joshua McNeil, who has worked diligently for 3 years to refine the model. He will walk you through an example and lay out the conditions that will make it work.
Thanks, Mary. And good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners, Community Budget Advisors, and everybody else tuning in. As Mary mentioned, I serve as Business Operations Manager in the Auditor's Office. Thanks for allowing us the opportunity to present our budget. Here's a somewhat simplified example from our FY22 requested budget submission that demonstrates how the model could work. The first line, which is green, shows our base budget for FY22. Some folks call it current appropriation level or CAL. But anyway, the first line also shows the out years projected through FY26. The second line simply shows the amounts that we would request if the funding model were approved by council. The third line shows the percent increase per fiscal year, which also, if you notice, demonstrates our intention to only request an increase in 3 of the 5 years. In dollars, that's approximately $550,000 over a 5-year span. Before I get to the blue line at the bottom, there are a few assumptions baked into the base budget projections that I want to call out. So the first assumption is there are no cut packages requested of elected offices in the 5-year window. Also, the funding that's currently tied to IPR, Independent Police Review, is projected to remain in the auditor's office. So the model assumes that we would move forward with the new evaluation and investigative services program. And then finally, the ongoing budget, base budget projections in our out years are mostly consistent with city inflationary factors. Okay, so back to the blue line, the last line. It shows one of the priciest ongoing expenses that an office can incur, and that's the cost of hiring a full-time employee, salary, benefits, statutory costs, all included. In this example, we would hire a performance auditor in FY23, which is the second year in the model. The out year costs are projected through FY26 as well. So if you're looking at the graphic in FY23, we're starting off at about $150,000 with hiring a performance auditor, and then it gradually escalates up to about $158,000 in FY26. So if you take the green and take the blue and compare them, what you're doing is you're comparing our total request in a 5-year funding model to an ongoing amount that it takes to cover the cost of hiring a performance auditor. If you look at the two numbers, the total numbers, you'll see that there is a small deficit. If the example were real, we would have to utilize our auditor's office reserve fund or projected underspending to cover the difference. This example shows how the funding model could work, but we need both parts to work in tandem. Both the 1.5% increase in 3 of the 5 years and the reserve fund. I think the main takeaway from this example is we are requesting less than $200,000 in 3 out of 5 years. And with this model, we could advance auditor's office priorities like hiring 1 additional performance auditor to increase our capacity to perform the accountability work that the public values. Right now, the city invests less in auditing than Multnomah County and Metro as a percentage of its total budget and of its total number of employees. Last year, there were several audit topics that we did not get to, like homeless services, 911 operations, inclusionary housing, citywide asset management, because frankly, we lack the capacity. Now that you've seen how the model could work, let me tell you about 5 main components that make up the funding model. If approved, this is how we envision the model working. Number 1, modest annual growth of 1.5%, not to exceed a total of $550,000 over a 5-year span. To put that in context, that's only a fraction of the citywide general fund total target amount, and it's spread out over 5 years. Number 2, Commitment that the auditor will decline annual increases when it is not needed. Again, just like I just demonstrated in the example, we do not anticipate requesting an increase in at least 2 years of the 5-year window. Also, we've developed a financial plan that captures projected revenues and expenses over a 5-year period. If the extra funding is not needed in a given year, the auditor will notify council and the city budget office early on in the budget development process. Number 3, a mechanism for council to adjust the model in the event of a fiscal emergency consistent with decreases applied to all elected offices. For example, if it's a cut year and the elected offices take a cut, we will propose a cut that's consistent with the other elected offices. Number 4, ongoing funding protection for any permanent appointments made during the 5-year span. For example, if we hire a new full-time employee at any point during the 5-year period, like the example that we just went through, and it's decided at a later date that the funding model will be discontinued or sunsetted, office would need assurances from council in the form of ongoing funding for that particular position. And finally, number 5, additional funding may be requested if the auditor consents to new or expanded responsibilities through code changes when voter-approved charter changes require new resources to implement, or in cases of sizable unanticipated expenses, such as an emergency repair to the Portland Archives and Record Management Facility. So those are the 5 main components of the proposed funding model. But before I close, let me just say the city has been working without a framework to implement the 2017 Charter Amendment for 4 years now. We are at a point where the Auditor's Office and the City Budget Office agree that such a framework is needed to establish agreed upon expectations and procedures for this annual responsibility. We need council's help to complete this last bit of unfinished charter business. With that, I'll turn it back over to the City Auditor to conclude our presentation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Josh. The format of this hearing is a budget work session, but I want you to hear it as a call to action. Our outdated commission form of government puts you in the unenviable position of thinking both as legislators and executive administrators. There's a reason these roles are separated in every other city of our size and larger. My hope, though, is that you'll step back from your executive branch perspective and focus as legislators on the city as an organization led by 6 elected officials that serves and employs people. The voters 4 years ago emphatically said they wanted their auditor's office to be unfettered by interference from those it holds accountable. So let's get moving on the funding model. You would be giving up control of less than $200,000 annually, while at the same time meeting voters' expectations and aligning action with your stated appreciation for accountability. We will more than make up that minuscule amount when your bureaus implement our recommendations for smarter, more transparent government. I understand why there is an appetite in the streets to take a sledgehammer to the police bureau and at the ballot box to destroy the existing accountability system. But sledgehammers aren't effective tools for policymakers who more often need scalpels to ensure the greatest good with the least collateral damage. Let's not lose sight of the fact that the city obligated itself in a federal court settlement agreement, and our work is yet unfinished. We must act in good faith to meet the terms of the agreement. It is up to the full council and the auditor to ensure we do. We stand prepared to do our part, to dig out of the backlog of cases we have in independent police review and again meet our timeliness requirements. But you can't dehumanize and delegitimize the city employees who work within a system the public no longer wants and expect them to continue serving on your timetable to create a new one. So let's provide the security independent police review employees need to continue serving the community and get the city back into compliance with its part of the settlement agreement. Let's put their skills and experience to work in a new role in the future to inform a broad array of issues important to the public, especially historically underserved communities. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Jessica, if I may, I'm sorry, Director Kanad, if I may, I want to correct some misinformation that has been put on the public record. And I can't even start responding to the auditor until I do that. So I want to start by saying last year during our budget, when the mayor asked every city bureau to take a 5% pay cut, every elected office did that. Every elected office had employees who were furloughed. And in fact, many of the electeds took more furlough days so that their lower income employees would not have to take furlough days. I am just pretty much disgusted that we have an auditor that refuses to manage the public finance system that should never be any independent commissioner or mayor's portfolio. We have an auditor who's absolutely refused to do administrative court hearings because she has elected to withdraw her consent to do so. I have not heard anyone ask for this new imagined program that has no teeth, no depth, and quite frankly, no one asked for it. It certainly appears to me that this is an effort to maintain a budget without any real deliberative effort to actually do things differently. And let me talk about the $500,000. The $500,000 wasn't some voter mandate. The $500,000 was your request to keep $1 million in your budget if you had cost underruns, that you could maintain it up to $1 million. The city council decided that they would allow you to keep $500,000, $500,000. It was not your money to have. It was money that should have gone back into the general fund to be redistributed. The other thing that I want to remind my new colleagues, because they weren't here and they don't know that they're not being told the entire story, is that this year, the mayor's guidance said any bureau with less than 30 employees would be exempt from having to take the 5% cut. It had absolutely nothing to do with whether we were elected or non-elected. It had everything to do with the size of our office. And I am offended that we have an elected auditor that would come and misrepresent so directly the decisions that this city council made last year and the recommendations that the mayor put forth this year. The auditor's office chose on her own to not, in fact, submit the 5% cut as requested. And when the voters told you to be independent, they didn't tell you to be arrogant and to actually dictate what would or would not happen. So yes, the voters also spoke about why they want a new oversight board. So no matter how beautifully you talk about IPR, the voters have a totally different perspective of it. If there's to be a new unit, I would want to know what's the new training? What is the new experience that these people would need to fold up a brand new unit? And again, we are in a budget downturn. We know next year's budget will be less than this year's budget. And we are trying to be financially responsible. And I just find it appalling, someone who never wants to collaborate with anyone would come in and misrepresent yourself so outrageously. I want to be very clear. There is no special treatment of my office because I took a lot of downtown last year with no pay. No other office is exempt. The only thing that exempts us is we don't have 30 people in our office. How fortunate you have 51. I think it does a disservice to our Budget Advisory Committee when they are given information that is absolutely not true and is slanted to paint a perspective so that you feel like somehow the city council is not working in support of the auditor. I have welcomed every audit you've done, and I've never seen one of my colleagues say no to an audit. So Madam Auditor, I think you've got some issues that you need to check, but do not misrepresent what we do at the city of Portland. We're in a budget crisis. There will be cuts, and you had the arrogance to not even submit a cut. So I'm done. I see Commissioner Maps would like to weigh in. I'm sorry, Commissioner Kennard, are you facilitating the dialogue?
So I can. I am, I want to be sure that the auditor has some time to respond to any and all comments, but I know Commissioner Maps also has his hand raised. So let's go ahead and hear from Commissioner Maps. And then I want to be sure that we have time for the auditor for any further closing remarks. And I will note that it is 2:30. So we will move to our next agenda item as soon as we can. Go ahead, Commissioner Maps.
Actually, because we're behind, why don't I pause my question here? I'll give the auditor a chance to respond. And if we still have time, I'll come back with my question.
And I do want to make sure that the Community Budget Advisory Committee gets a chance to weigh in, because I do not want them swayed by what they've heard so far.
Okay. So Community Budget Advisors, if anybody has anything that you would like to share, please raise your hand. Madam Auditor, would you like to say anything, or would you like us to move to any other comments or questions?
The only thing I'd like to say is that the work of my office speaks for itself, and there was too much from Commissioner Hardesty to address here, and nor do I think that much of it deserves a response. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay.
Colleagues, I just want to let you know I'm back now. Sorry, obviously I missed something. I'll have to watch the video, but
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Auditor, that I was delayed on another issue, but I'll watch the rest.
Mayor, I see Frida's hand is up.
It's just a clarification, and it's more because I want to understand this right. I know there is going to be a new Oversight Commission, I guess that's what you'll be calling it, and there's a process to do it. And it appears that it has to be done based on the auditor's report by June of 2022. And if I'm understanding what the auditor said, this moving to this investigative unit, I guess you'd call it, is just a bridge. But what I need to know is it then requesting, once the new Police Oversight Commission is all settled, is that investigative is her proposal to keep the investigative unit and separate from the new oversight? I think I've stated the
Yes.
question right.
Yes, that is the proposal, is to keep the 14 people who work in independent police review now, and to pivot their skills and experience into this new division. And it's called the Evaluation and Investigative Services Division, because the evaluation work is new. So I spent most of my presentation talking about that. But the auditor's office also does a variety of investigations. We have a fraud hotline. We do investigations around the lobbyist registration program. And we also have the ombudsman, who does complaint investigations against any city function. And so their skills would apply both on the evaluation side of that division and on the investigative side, because they are expert observers, and they synthesize a lot of information, and they write reports just like we would do in that new division. So they apply across the board.
Okay, but then that would stay in place, your evaluation investigative, but then we'd also be funding a new Police Oversight Commission too, in unit, whatever we're going to call it when it's done. Is that correct?
Yes, the ballot measure included some guaranteed funding for the new accountability board.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify for Frida, this new proposed unit does not exist. The first time I heard of it was this week. where I saw the basic bones of what's being proposed by the auditor. No one has asked for it. So it will be part of the deliberation, but I don't want to give you the impression that there's an assumption that what the auditor is proposing is anything anybody else is interested in.
I understand that. I was just trying to get clarification that in the end, there'd be two separate units that would be funded.
And I don't know that the auditor gets to decide when IPR ends.
Okay.
Mayor, take it away.
Back to you.
Yeah, so Mayor, if we're ready to conclude this portion, we were planning on having our second presentation start a few minutes ago, which is the Small Bureaus Supporting City Services presentation. So we will go ahead and kick that off, and I would request that Keelan or a member of your team please bring up that presentation slideshow for us. I'll pause for a moment, and while my colleagues join me, this is a joint presentation. For the first time, we're presenting together, myself and the directors from the auditor's office, the attorney's office, the Office of Equity and Human Rights and Government Relations. And so we're going to start off by just quickly introducing ourselves. So you all know me, I'm the budget director, Jessica Kennard. I'm going to pass it over to Director Markeisha Webster Smith.
Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Markeisha Webster Smith. I am Director for our Office of Equity and Human Rights, and also have the privilege of serving as Special Advisor to the Mayor on issues of racial equity and justice, social justice. So happy to be here. And then I'm passing it to who?
Whomever you want.
Okay, I'll pass it to Robert.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Robert Taylor, City Attorney. I'm the Director of the City Attorney's Office. And I'll pass it to Director Fraley.
Dillahunt, Shahushi, Brannon, Quaytate Fraley. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brannon Fraley, and I'm the new Director for the Office of Government Relations.
All right, great. Brianne, I just want to let you know that you sounded a little staticky and muffled. So if you're able to do a little troubleshooting before your next speaking event, I just wanted to flag that for you. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So the combined budget for our 4 bureaus totals just under $25 million, and we have a total together of 122 FTE. These resources are apportioned amongst our bureaus as shown on this slide. Our functions are predominantly supported by a combination of general fund discretionary resources, as well as resources from bureaus, either through interagency service agreements or through the city's general fund overhead model. We are some of the smallest bureaus in the city, and as you will hear about more in this presentation, we leverage our very limited resources to deliver upon critical processes and policy implementation on behalf of the council and the entire city. Next slide, please. And I'll pass it to Robert.
The City Attorney's Office budget is $15.6 million, and we have 73 FTE. With that, we provide virtually all of the legal services for the city, including litigation, land use, labor, contracts, public records, ethics, and bureau advice. We have several measures of success for our office, one of which is how often we obtain favorable litigation results, and we're at about 95% favorable results. We also are required to review all contract documents by the city, and that is right around 10,000 documents a year that we review and approve as to form. We also do preventative legal work in the form of training to try to make sure folks comply with the legal requirements, and we're at around 300 hours every year of training. Another measure of our success is our relative cost effectiveness when compared to outside counsel, and we average $166 per hour compared to $400 an hour for outside counsel. We did submit the 5% cut as required, and then we are requesting one add back of a cut that we had proposed. And that add back is a vacancy that will come open in the next fiscal year. And the budget office has recommended that addition. Thank you.
So we could go to the next slide, please. So with our staff of 16.5 current FTE, the City Budget Office performs many critical citywide functions supporting transparency and fiscal responsibility. We provide management and oversight of 4 budget processes throughout the year. We track and monitor all city funds and provide financial forecasting for the city's general and recreational cannabis tax funds. We provide impartial analysis and recommendations on hundreds of budget and legislative actions each year. We support and integrate the use of citywide performance data in budget and policy decision-making. And finally, we provide independent support and management for the Portland Utility Board, as well as support for our citywide budget advisors. Our measures of success predominantly reflect citywide outcomes, reflecting our role in managing citywide processes. These include a number of Bureau key performance measures, which are trending positively, as well as the city's ability to reduce its major maintenance backlog. Next slide, please. CBO's 5% ongoing budget reduction totals $139,000 and includes the elimination of one of our 8 financial analyst positions, as well as partial funding supporting our annual Hatfield Fellow. We are asking for these resources back, with our top priority being restoring the financial analyst position. If this position is not restored, the City Budget Office would need to curtail our analytical output, providing less in-depth analysis and focusing more exclusively on the general fund, as we do hold the fiduciary responsibility over those resources. So the general fund comprises only 10% of city resources. This would hamper our ability to support comprehensive financial resiliency. However, we obviously understand the city's current financial situation, and so this is an option for council consideration. In response to the council and community interest, the City Budget Office has submitted a request for resources to further community connections in our budgeting processes and decision-making. This proposal builds off one-time funding that was provided to pilot the Portland Insight Survey in 2019, in which we collected survey data from over 8,800 Portlanders, deploying multilingual canvassers to collect data from underrepresented groups and allowing us to disaggregate data by race and ethnicity. This approach is more expensive, but is absolutely essential in collecting data that illuminates disparities across demographic groups, allowing the city to make decisions that are then tailored towards achieving equitable outcomes. Council feedback from the pilot included a desire to understand more of the why behind the survey data, which this request seeks to address. So this request would further enhance our use of paid multilingual canvassers, and it would also launch a new series of community budget labs where we would collect more qualitative information to help us refine our understanding of community needs, as well as identify solutions around citywide priority issue areas. These projects would be managed by a new community engagement analyst within the budget office, who would also connect with and provide resources to community members and groups that want to better understand and engage with the city's budget processes. The request totals $275,000, which would require approximately $121,000 in general fund discretionary resource. And I just want to say we have a unique opportunity right now, because the first survey was done in 2019, to collect pre and post pandemic data. And so that is another reason why we decided to put this forward at this particular moment in time.
Director Kennard, could I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
I understand. So that request, the 275, is for the survey exclusively, or does it include more than the survey? I wasn't clear on that.
Both. It's an enhancement to it. It's the survey plus. We're building upon the initial survey. The initial survey was quantitative only. It only provided quantitative data. We are proposing to enhance that, both by increasing our efforts to collect data by underrepresented community members with more multilingual canvassers. And then we're also pairing it with a qualitative methodology that's sort of best practices in collecting information to help us understand the why behind some of that quantitative data.
Okay, and just to refresh my memory, 2 years ago, that was one time only research.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Next slide, please. Turn it over to Dr. Smith.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. So the mission of the Office of Equity and Human Rights is to lead the City of Portland's commitment to equity. We hold the city accountable by developing policies, practices, and procedures that strive to dismantle systems of oppression and build equitable foundations for our most systemically oppressed communities. We center race and disability through education and analysis. and individuals experience multiple forms of oppression, and thus we drive equity with an intersectional approach. And so from this slide, and I apologize, it's not so nice and fancy, you can see the sort of services that we provide, providing guidance and leadership, education, thinking about technical assistance that we provide to bureaus, establishing accountability measures, and then making sure that we are aligning with community priorities, particularly our Black, Indigenous, people of color, and people with disability communities. We also noted some measures of success, and we are in conversations about how can we continue to evolve the measures, and what does that mean as we continue to partner with the office of our city budget office. So we don't have any current budget asks, but we are mindful that as we continue to build capacity, we need to adjust for classification and compensation requests. And we are embarking on a project to ensure that our current body of work, skills, experience, and knowledge.
Is that me or did she freeze?
No, I think it's her because she's froze on my screen too.
Dr. Smith, if you can hear us, can you turn off your video and see if we can still hear you? Dr. Smith, can you hear us? I think she lost her connection there.
Why don't we go ahead and move to the next slide, because we're taking turns speaking, and then when Dr. Smith's able to regain her connection, we can come back to that slide.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Jessica, can you hear me this time?
Yes,
okay.
Excellent.
Okay, perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here today. My name is Brandon Fraley, for the record, and I'm the Director of the Office of Government Relations.
Excuse me, if you turned your camera off, we would hear you better. There's static in the background.
Okay, I will turn the camera off.
Oh, it looks like you may have earplugs in. Do you have earplugs in?
Yeah, I have technical. Do
Wow.
you want me to try and unplug my headphones?
Why don't you unplug first and see if that works?
Okay.
Sorry, technical people. I just jumped right in because.
How is that? How does that sound?
Sounds a little better, I think. Why don't we try?
Okay, well, I will do my best. I hope that you all can hear me. So as a central service bureau, we have an inward-facing focus in who we serve. We promote and advance the work of our clients, including the City Council, Auditor, bureaus, and Prosper Portland. Each year, the Office of Government Relations works on a coordinated effort to bring forward a consensus-driven legislative agenda. The work we do centers around racial justice, climate and environmental justice, community and economic development, public safety and first response, preserving local authority, and stabilization of individuals and families. The Office of Government Relations has 5 programmatic areas, including federal, state, regional, tribal, and international. We serve to advance city goals and initiatives through effective advocacy of federal, state, and regional governments and a broad range of non-governmental entities, and through a centrally coordinated tribal relations program that works with city bureaus to facilitate policymaking in support of tribal governments and urban American Indian and Alaska Native communities. And last but not least, promote city policy priorities at the international level and provide diplomatic and cultural protocol guidance when hosting international delegations in Portland. We are currently working on a strategic plan and new metrics for the upcoming fiscal years that will embed equity as an outcome. This year, we do not have any additional asks or decision packages for the budget, but I want to echo what Dr. Smith was saying in regards to the desires of the city to build upon the core values of equity, that we will need to build our capacity moving forward in the future to achieve those core values and goals. And thank you, and I'll hand it over to Director Kennard.
Yeah, so let's go back one slide if we could, and just allow Dr. Webster Smith to complete her talking points on this one.
I heard myself beautifully. I was like, no one seems to be moving. Okay, so I hope you heard the mission. We do lots of good things in the name of equity. We'll leave that. Get a sense of what our services are, providing guidance, leadership, professional learning opportunities for folks in the city, technical assistance to bureaus in a variety of different areas. I have a bird. I'm very sorry. He's very loud. This is a day. Accountability measures to make sure that we are advancing our equity policies and initiatives, and making sure that we're aligning with our communities, in particular our Black, Indigenous, people of color, and people with disability communities. You'll see some measures of success that we have noted for fiscal year 2021. And we are actually in conversations continually about how can we make sure that the measures of success are really capturing what they need to capture to help us advance our work. And so that is some ongoing conversation that we started with our city budget office, and I hope to continue. And just finally, we don't have any current budget asks, but we are, as we've built capacity, we had some positions that we were funded through the adopted budget last spring and then in our fall bump process. So as we are building that capacity, we want to continue to think about how we adjust for classification and compensation. And we are working with the Bureau of Human Rights, no, that's us, the Bureau of Human Resources, to look at classification structure that is appropriate to the skills, work, experience that folks in our team are a part of. So I think I got it all in. My apologies, it's quite the day. Okay.
Dr. Smith, could I ask you a question about the Equity 101 training?
Yeah,
Is
sure.
that required for all employees, or where are we with that? And if it's, it is required. So when you say part of the measures of success or the number of Equity 101 training sessions offered annually, is that a reflection then of basically customer service, the ease with which people gain access to the required training, or what's the primary meaning behind that measure of success?
Yeah, I think it's partly that. I think it's been sort of an internal way for our office to also track, right, how many people are signing up, going through that process. Eventually, it will be a mechanism to think about as we are sort of shifting to develop maybe what we would call an Equity 201, right, sort of an advanced training, that this will give us some data about who has been through kind of that first one, who we might tag for an advanced course. It also gives us a little bit of data around like historical data. And so if there are people that have been with the city for quite some time, it may be time for a refresher. So those are some of the conversations that we've been having related to that data point.
Great. I'd love to follow up with you offline and be helpful. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for actually asking that question, because I would wonder where we would be when we would be at herd mentality, which so that we could move on to 2.0 and 3.0 and 5.6. Because I am concerned that if we're not measuring, like what's the percentage of city employees that have the basic knowledge around equity, right? Who can tell you a definition of equity? And aren't too many good ones that I've heard right off the bat, let me just say. So I am curious as to what's the progression, right? Because clearly we don't want people staying at the 101 level for the rest of their career at the city.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are conversations we are having. So I appreciate Mayor and Commissioner Hardesty raising that.
Thank you. I want to also just go back to Director Kennard, because Director Kennard, that survey that your office led that one time was the best survey that I believe we've ever done, the most intentional survey that we've ever done at the city of Portland. Most of the time, surveys are done in conjunction with something else. And I think it was a novel idea, and I'm glad about the expansion, and I do support the expansion because we need to make sure that we're reaching people in the language that they're most comfortable speaking in an environment that works for them, and we're not making people adjust so that their voices are heard inside the halls of City Hall. So I was disappointed it wasn't funded last year, but you couldn't have done anything because we were all locked in. And so I'm very happy to see it on the agenda, and just want you to know you've got my strong support for that and for the continued work that the Office of Equity and Human Rights is involved in. So thank you.
I think it's back to you, Jessica. Yes.
Thank you. Yes. If we could go ahead and skip forward 2 slides now. Thank you. So, this has been a really excellent exercise. At least I felt that way. I hope my colleagues feel the same. Coming together and working on a joint presentation. We wanted to talk a little bit about each of our individual work because it is obviously distinct. But in coming together, we realized that there is a very consistent thread that sort of joins us. And that is we all implement complex, high impact citywide policies and processes on behalf of council and bureaus. And with that comes certain opportunities and certain challenges because we do this with, as I mentioned before, really limited staff. So I'm going to actually turn it back over to Dr. Webster Smith to talk a little bit about how this work relates to what the role we have to play within the equity, promoting equity across the city.
Great. Thought you were going to say I'm passing back to the bird lady. That's me. So the Portland City Council unanimously passed resolution 37492 on June 17th, 2020, adopting our core values of anti-racism, equity, transparency, communication, collaboration, and fiscal responsibility. And so we thought it was really, and I think we need to advance the slide. Yes, thank you. Thought it was really important to bring that into the space again, to sort of ground us, right, in what we have, the work that we've been doing over the past year. If we could go to the next slide, please. And so with that, there's some things that we want to keep in mind, right? Like, as Jessica said, we're uniquely positioned to think about how our offices work citywide and have impact citywide. And also this recognition that we are in systems that are built on, racist structures, ableist structures, right? We are, we're operating in systems of white supremacy. And I don't want us to lose that as sort of a understanding for the complexity of the work that we have to do. And so we have to think about what system are we defending, right? What system are we investing in? Where are we asking for legislative action? And how do we really support systemic change? And that becomes very difficult, right? And so we, as smaller offices within our structure, are really trying to think about how we continue to work on the margins as best we can to really, advance, right, some of that very deep system change that needs to happen. And so each of us is going to talk a little bit individually about how we do that. And so I think our illustrious city attorney, Robert, is next.
Would you advance the slide, please?
I bet Robert's not used to that intro.
Yeah, yes, I am not used to that. So our office does several things to help advance equity throughout the city and then also internally. So we give legal advice on city programs that advance equity, and those are programs operated by many different bureaus. Specifically regarding the COVID response, we have provided advice on issues that affect employees and also around the use of federal funds. We're also in our litigation section defending the city's eviction moratorium and other tenant protections in court. And that's a good example of our office defending policies of council that are intended to help the most vulnerable in our community. And then we have also participated in the results-based accountability trainings led by the Office of Equity and Human Rights. And we are also committed to internal equity initiatives in our own office. And you can please advance the slide. Thank you.
So the Budget Office is also striving to actively integrate anti-racism and disability equity into our internal culture and all of our processes and deliverables. In the past year, we've begun regular staff-led discussions and workshops seeking to increase our understanding and awareness around issues of equity, as well as to identify ways for us to help actively dismantle systems of inequity. So as an all-staff team, we're looking at the equity implications of everything we do, from designing budget processes to reviewing budget proposals to supporting advisory boards and promoting disaggregated and equity-focused performance data. Our current efforts, I'm really proud of the efforts we're making, but they will be greatly enhanced with the expertise of the forthcoming Small Bureau Equity Manager, which Council approved funding for last fall. And as with much of the City Budget Office's work, we rely heavily on our partnership and collaboration with other bureaus Most notably, of course, our partnership with the Bureau of Equity and Human Rights with the Budget Equity Assessment Tool. We also work closely with bureaus like the Bureau of Human Resources, as well as the Office of Government Relations and many others to try to make sure we're integrating our processes and looking for these opportunities to do systems change work. With that, I will pass it on to, again, to Dr. Webster Smith.
All right, you can advance the slide for me, please. So here's a little bit about sort of how we are also, just by nature of our name, this is what we should be doing, right? In terms of our city core values of anti-racism and equity. But we had the pleasure to be a part of the development of our COVID-19 relief and recovery toolkit last spring. We have led efforts around the results-based accountability, which many bureaus and offices have taken part in. We've actually finished up a second cohort at the beginning of the fall last year. We have our, proud to say, our strategic plan. It is going to go out to community to have them sort of, look back, give feedback, think about, what we are proposing sort of as some direction for ourselves. So really proud to breathe some life into that. We are starting to have conversations about phase 2 of Bureau racial equity plans and providing guidance in that way. And then as a part of the process that we're in now, we have, in collaboration with our city budget office, developed our budget equity tool and have used that collaboration, I think, to really think about how to get at the system, right? And to provide some information to bureaus that helps them in keeping equity at the center of their budget development. Okay, and I will turn it over to Director Fraley.
Well, thank you, Dr. Smith. And as we all work towards our herd mentality, I'll share what
Director Fraley, we're not hearing you now, believe it or not.
Can you maybe try your earphones again?
Can you hear me now?
Oh.
I think she thinks we're just hazing her at this point.
I was a little bit nervous because this is my first city council presentation. So I really think that it's just the mayor and his initiation. So thank you.
Your instincts aren't bad, I'll tell you that. But in this particular case, did you sound fine now? Okay,
good. So just holler if you can't hear me, but I will do my best to make sure that this laptop is working. Okay, so I am very pleased to announce that the Office of Government Relations Budget was established utilizing the 2016-2020 Racial Equity Plan. Also, what that signifies is that 2020 has passed, and now we get an opportunity to look collaboratively moving forward and creating a new racial equity plan for our office. The requested budget includes funding for robust engagement with state, federal, and regional governments to advocate for issues of importance to underserved communities focused on improved outcomes. Our work is informed by results-based accountability, which Dr. Smith mentioned earlier, a framework that helps us identify racial disparities, conditions, root causes related to policies, and to develop strategies to reduce and/or eliminate those disparities. In 2019, the former director and the director of international relations completed an extensive course in results-based accountability, and the rest of our team completed the 2020 cohort, resulting in intentional state and federal legislative agendas that aim to reduce and eliminate disparities. Through our equity work, the state and federal teams have created a feedback loop with clients, you all, to identify racial and disability disparities in 3 ways. 1, we reconstructed the 2021 state and federal legislative agenda to center racial and disability equity in the totality of the city's policy and budget advocacy. If a legislative budget request comes to our office that is not in the approved agendas, we ask clients and ourselves, is this based on centering racial and disability equity in our collective advocacy work? And then we apply a 3-pronged decision matrix. 1, does the budget advance the legislative agenda? If it's not within the agenda, does it advance racial equity? Or is this an effort led by a BIPOC community or initiative? In addition to the state and federal and regional work that we do, we have the inclusion of the tribal program into the Office of Government Relations. And it serves as an opportunity to conduct outreach to bureaus that have trained, and we have trained city staff about tribal sovereignty, and we are working on establishing a citywide baseline of cultural competency, or as Commissioner Hardesty calls it, herd competency for engagement with tribes and Native communities. And I just wanted to shout out that collectively within this Central City Bureaus and the Small Bureau team, we've allocated or moved forward with jointly coming together to develop that Small Bureau Equity Manager position, which will be coming on this spring. And we look forward to working with them on our strategic plan and updating our equity plan for the budget. Thank you. And I think I have the next slide for climate action. So next slide, please. Really happy to be here today to report on how the small central service offices contribute to climate change in regards to the city's actions. So if you all don't know that the city has a goal of 100% meeting 100% of community-wide energy needs within renewable energy by 2050. We do this by collaborating and integrating strategies for climate resilience into our regional, state, federal, and international relations work by including policies to reduce carbon pollution, promote clean energy and transportation, and support frontline communities and restore ecosystems. As central service bureaus, we are a strategic thought partner to individual bureaus and offices in this work. Next slide, please. And then I just have to give a shout out to the City Council as a whole. And we'd like to applaud you all for your leadership to collectively come together to identify the joint council priorities of addressing houselessness, safety, and economic stability and recovery for individuals and families. The work is paramount to the well-being and resiliency of our city. Our central city bureaus contribute to the key council priorities through advocacy and advancing priority outcomes, utilization of the equity toolkit to identify meaningful outcomes, monitoring, stabilizing, and maximizing city resource allocations, and legal advice and action from the illustrious new city council. Next slide.
And in working with the four offices to develop this presentation, we did want to highlight again the common challenges and barriers that we all have. We do address large and complex systems with relatively small budgets and small staffs. And so that makes us vulnerable to large spikes in workload or budget cuts to be able to continue to serve those complex and multi-bureau systems. As we mentioned earlier, the other theme that really emerged when we were all preparing for this presentation was that we support and advance the broader city system here because we serve multiple bureaus, but we also recognize that those systems and institutions can be infected with institutional racism and ableist ideas. And so that really challenges us and motivates our work to seek the investments necessary and encourages us and our offices to take the risks that are necessary to really drive the change in those same systems that we support. And then of course, as we demonstrated today, we're all operating in a remote environment in the pandemic situation, and that causes unique challenges like we had here today, but it also does take, it has had an impact on our workforce and morale and their well-being, and that's something that as directors we're all really tuned into and trying to address. The next slide, please. And every year we do the annual budget process, and in difficult years like this year, we have to consider cuts. But the council also gave us direction to keep sight of longer term issues and liabilities and keep reminding the council that there are bigger, longer term issues out there that council needs to be aware of. And Last year, the budget office, the chief financial officer, and the city attorney prepared a report to council that highlighted these 7 long-term issues. And I know Jessica would be happy to circulate that again for all the members of council to remind them. But these are some of the issues, including PERS liability, Portland Harbor, the Columbia levy, and then major maintenance and infrastructure backlogs. These are things that council should keep in mind as they're developing each budget every year.
Commissioner Hardesty.
I was on mute. I'm normally telling the mayor he's on mute. Thank you for bringing this chart back. I think the last 2 years I've asked Tom Reinhardt when we were going to have a conversation about how we actually address this. Because of course, each of these categories, money would come from different places. And I just will say, for me, it's the maintenance and infrastructure backlog that keeps me up at night, because there's no process that I know of in a city to actually address that. So maybe that's a conversation when OMF actually comes and presents to us. But I wanted my newer colleagues to know that this liability is just growing, and the more we do nothing with it, the worse it's going to get. Thank you.
So that concludes our presentation. We started a little bit late, so I will pause and maybe allow for a couple minutes for questions, but we will want to turn it over to actually the Office of Management and Finances next. See if there are any other questions for us at this moment.
Up for you, Tom.
Thank you. I'm putting response to Commissioner Hardesty in the chat. I know we have an upcoming session that I was in a planning meeting on regarding that question, Commissioner Hardesty. So we will do a full walkthrough with you. Thanks for the question. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners, and Community Budget Advisors. My name is Tom Reinhardt. I'm Chief Administrative Officer for the city. I'm grateful for the time we have today to give you an overview of the Office of Management and Finance's budget proposal. Listen, most of you know my team and I well enough to know that we are pragmatists. We are in a virtual setting in an afternoon time slot on a beautiful sunny day. We didn't know it would be sunny, but we knew it would be afternoon, and we knew it would be virtual. So here's what we've done to craft this to hopefully get the most out of our time together. We're going to spend about 15 minutes talking about our role in the city's response to this last year of crises, as a way of talking to you about why we proposed the cuts and requests that we did in response to the direction. And finally, we will outline a few future challenges that we think you should know about as our city council. So that's how we plan to spend our time today. The Office of Management and Finance takes great pride in being the engine that keeps the city running through our central services. As we begin, I first of all want to send the warmest possible virtual thank you to the more than 800 city employees that we represent in this presentation today. Only a few are in this meeting, and probably only a few more watching. But I want to say, in ways large and small, you kept the organization running this year despite dozens of obstacles. We appreciate you, and I'm always proud to present on your behalf. The Office of Management and Finance, or as we call it, OMF, has a unique role within our form of government, as we are in effect a bureau of several bureaus formed years ago by Mayor Katz. We provide centralized revenue and financial services, human resources, technology services, fleet and facilities management, and my personal favorite and highest challenge all the time, our project leadership on council priority initiatives. The team just put a link in the chat for folks that want to have a more extensive breakdown of OMF, particularly people that aren't always in meetings with us, maybe the budget advisors. Due to the interconnected nature of our services and the fact that our services support all offices and bureaus every day, you will hear from different leaders in OMF throughout the budget process, and I'm very proud to always be at the table to help. Because we're at the heart of the city's ecosystem, OMF was uniquely positioned to help the city respond to what can only be called a volatile and unpredictable 2020. We are grateful that City Council asked us to step up and lead in many ways, as we all did our best to navigate the pandemic, the related economic recession, racial justice reckoning, and historic wildfires across our beautiful state. To illustrate our role over the past year, which will give you a good grounding in our budget proposal, we hope, I'm going to give you a small glimpse into what you would have seen on any given day from our people during the pandemic. 1 year ago, almost to the day, the city's Emergency Coordination Center mobilized in response to the escalating threat of COVID-19, and we immediately asked our communications and finance specialists to play leadership roles. If you toured the emergency hub in East Portland, you would have found our public information officer coordinating a flurry of public health messaging and setting up systems to communicate with both employees and the public. You would have seen our grants manager establishing the emergency finance response so we could marshal resources and ensure the city's stability during a time of crisis. Through every aspect of our emergency response, we put equity front and center. We have seen the pandemic lay bare and even amplify inequities across the country and locally throughout our Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, as well as our disabled and houseless communities. I'm proud that under the leadership of our strategic projects manager, the city spent more than 90% of our $114 million in federal CARES dollars directly to community members' needs and our most vulnerable community members and small business owners in particular. If it was a Tuesday or Thursday afternoon, the directors in this meeting know you would have seen all of us, myself included, in an afternoon meeting of all of the directors with support staff to coordinate pandemic response, troubleshoot problems, and ensure planning and communication was coordinated well across the organization and with our partners and other governments. This picture on this slide will be very familiar to all of us. Like organizations around the world, thousands of employees found themselves thrust immediately into telework and looking to our human resources and technology teams to make it possible. They did an amazing job. Changes that would normally take years to implement and that we were actually forecasting out to 2025 and 2027 were completed in a matter of weeks. Last year alone, our Bureau of Technology Services issued more than 1,300 laptops and 2,300 remote secure access tokens. For a while, those secure access tokens were more sought after than Teslas. BTS also worked fast to increase the city's fiber network capacity to withstand a nearly 8-fold increase in virtual network traffic. We call that the pipe for people that don't follow the colloquialisms of city government. To ensure a consistent approach to teleworking, our Bureau of Human Resources worked with you to revise the administrative rule on telework. Thank you, Council. Like all of you, employees faced immediate and really significant pressures, caring for loved ones with underlying health conditions, overnight becoming teachers and helping children with virtual learning, worrying about financial uncertainty, and processing the murder of George Floyd and other Black Americans. We responded by amending human resource policies and providing employees with support services, and on the mayor's direction, a specific leave for people experiencing trauma due to the racial justice reckoning and the family pressures related to the pandemic. We worked with council to approve the safety net ordinance, granting authority to approve flexibility in terms of temporary leave, severance options, and work schedule amendments. As you all recognize during these presentations, thousands of city employees work in the field in various sites, even during a pandemic like COVID. From park rangers, fleet mechanics, firefighters, and many others, employees have continued reporting to their usual work sites with appropriate precautions. What you see on this screen is the cover shot to our workplace health and safety guidance. I wanted to call attention to this photo because we haven't been able to tour people through the reconstructed Portland building. That beautiful mural was done by a local artist to honor Lizzie K. Weeks, who was an important civil sector activist in Portland. So look forward to showing you that one day. And yeah, drawing on guidance from Multnomah County is how we created that workplace health and safety guidance. And we did it to ensure employees have information to keep themselves safe. And we continue to edit it as we prepare to bring people back to offices, hopefully soon. I'm also proud to announce that we'll soon be positioned to provide vaccines to city employees when we get a direct shipment from the state, as expected this spring. As we worked very hard to figure out ways to support city employees, we also committed to do what we could to care for the most vulnerable people in our community, including Portlanders experiencing houselessness. Our homelessness and urban camping impact reduction team prioritized the basic needs of unsheltered Portlanders. We significantly reduced campsite removals in keeping with public health guidelines. We placed more than 100 portable hygiene stations across the city, providing access to a basic human right, the ability to use the restroom and wash your hands in a safe, clean space. We also helped establish 3 outdoor shelters where people could safely follow guidelines and protect themselves from COVID. You can see an aerial shot of one of these in the picture. Thanks, Janet, for putting that in the chat. It's a C3PO shelter. Everywhere you look in Portland, you can see the impact of this year of multiple crises. It has been 1 year since spectators cheered on our beloved Portland Thorns or Portland Timbers at Providence Park, packed the Rose Garden to watch our long beloved Blazers, listen to a concert or watch a play at the Portland 5 theaters. And we are drawing down resources in the reserve funds to maintain stability in our spectator venues program. Local businesses too are struggling, as everybody knows. Customers are staying home, windows are boarded up, revenues down, and jobs have been lost. In this context, on the mayor's direction, we coordinated Open for Business, an integrated approach to supporting our business community. Over the last 6 months, this led to multiple actions for increasing investment to remove graffiti, clean debris and trash throughout the city, and help bring people back to local businesses as we could. Despite the recession, I'm proud to share that we also launched Portland Revenue Online last September, making it quicker and easier to pay city taxes. As many times as we asked our revenue division if they wanted to pause or slow down, they said no, 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 and they did it, and we're proud of them. The team has already processed over 45,000 payments, totaling $161 million, money that's badly needed to continue to serve our community. It's both heavy and uplifting at the same time to walk through the pressures of the past year and honor the collective work together as a way of putting some context around our budget cuts and requests. We know we have a lot more work ahead to create a thriving, equitable future for Portland. We also know, and we recognize, again, we're realists, we're pragmatists, we're going to need to do it with shrinking resources. I believe we're up to the job, and the Office of Management and Finance is prepared to play a leadership role. We've heard the City Council's priorities loud and clear: reimagining community safety, addressing Portland's houselessness crisis, supporting economic recovery. And we know that we need to approach each of these priorities with racial justice and climate resilience as our guiding principles. Those priorities will drive every budget proposal that you're seeing in front of you this year. Before going into our budget proposals, with the overview, I'm going to take a moment to again acknowledge the trials of the past year. The pandemic, movement for racial justice, civil unrest, wildfires, the cumulative effect has taken a huge toll on our employees, and I think you heard a pretty good rundown from Kathy Bless on this a couple of days ago. We've heard from many staff that feel stretched beyond their capacity as they struggle to maintain work-life balance of any type. And we approached our budget development with this context in mind and want you to know that. We fulfilled the mayor's direction to help stabilize city finances by submitting a 5% reduction across the Office of Management and Finance's general fund operations. This package reduces $1.6 million and eliminates 7 positions across the Bureau's general fund divisions. I want to be clear that we understand the reality. We know we need to take the reductions, and we did not ask to add them back. But I also want you to know it's not sustainable. And as you heard from the bureaus in the previous presentation, support services do not easily respond to fluctuations in demand. It's going to have an impact. Across the board cuts also prohibit and really just completely limit our ability to invest in our employees. Training funds and career development opportunities are nearly defunct. Again, though, we recognize the unique circumstances we're in together, and I want to thank staff for being clear about the trade-offs as we've made this proposal. We all know budgets reflect our values and priorities, and while we did not request any of our proposed cuts be added back, we did request a limited number of proposed additions based on what City Council has prioritized. We think they tie very closely to what you expect out of us and what the community expects. Now I'll turn it over to Carmen Merlo, our Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, to provide a short overview of our budget requests. Thank you, Carmen.
Thanks, Tom, and thank you, Mayor Wheeler, commissioners, and community budget advisors for the opportunity to discuss our strategic requests we're elevating this year in our decision packages. Equity is both a cornerstone for the city and for OMF, where we oversee high-impact programs that directly impact outcomes for employees and community members. Our equity and contracting programs support economic growth of businesses owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, women, and new entrepreneurs. And we've invested in equity through intensive staff training, supporting Bureau equity advancement teams, and a variety of initiatives. Yet we remain one of the city's only large bureau without a dedicated equity manager, a position that we're proposing to accelerate this and other crucial work. Reporting directly to the CAO, an equity manager will serve as a resource by centering equity and anti-racism throughout daily decisions, bureau policies, practices, and operations. Another one of our requests is to support the city's compliance with Oregon's Equal Pay Act. In 2017, the state passed equal pay legislation, expanding protections for employees who are subject to discriminatory pay practices. Our Bureau of Human Resources is requesting funds for 2 positions that will sustain efforts to remedy pay disparities among protected class employees. This decision package will make permanent positions funded in last fall's budget monitoring period. Our Division of Asset Management is responsible for ensuring our buildings are safe, well maintained, meet the operational needs of our employees, and aligned with our climate action and resilience goals. However, OMF's Facility Services Division lacks core foundational tools to ensure maintenance and upkeep of facilities, which were never part of the rate model that charges bureaus for services. And we know we have significant needs. Many of our civic buildings are functionally obsolete and no longer meet the Bureau's business needs or ensure the safety of its occupants. And I just want to say, Commissioner Hardesty, I still appreciate your comment on deferred major maintenance. And I want you to know that we do have a council work session scheduled for April 28th, where we talk about asset management. So I look forward to having more discussions with you at that time.
I do too. Thank you for that.
OMF is proposing to use major maintenance reserves to fund the one-time costs of a facility condition assessment and an asset management software system, and have secured the support of our customer bureaus to fund the ongoing costs to maintain these capabilities through very nominal rate increases as part of our bureau interagency agreements. The mayor's supplemental guidance also directed bureaus to develop strategies that will revitalize neighborhoods and enhance Portland's livability. Our homelessness and urban camping impact reduction program adjusted cleanup protocols and impact reduction strategies to comply with COVID health and safety guidelines. Unfortunately, these adjustments and protocols have led to an accumulation of garbage throughout Portland's unsanctioned campsites. During last fall's budget monitoring period, Council allocated funds to our impact reduction program to enhance trash collection services, primarily within the I-405 loop, by increasing the capacity of our campsite cleanup vendors. Trash continues accumulating throughout unsanctioned campsites within Portland, and we're now seeking a package that will stabilize those existing resources and extend cleaning efforts throughout the city. In December of last year, City Council appointed 20 charter commissioners to fulfill a once-a-decade opportunity, reviewing our city's founding documents and recommending changes to the way local government works. As we help our city recover from COVID-19 and make long overdue racial justice reforms, it's more important than ever to ensure community voices are represented and centered in this work. Because charter reviews are very heavily reliant on educating and engaging the community on an array of city government topics, we'll need to develop tools and invest in strategies to engage communities that have been historically excluded. To do this, we're seeking a one-time special appropriations request to adequately resource the Charter Review Commission by investing in its communication and community engagement capacity. And I will turn it back over to Tom.
Before you go, Carmen, Commissioner Hardesty has a question or a comment.
Yes, thank you. Could you go back a couple of slides, please? One more. Yes, I wanted to ask about whether or not it's time to break that contract up into a lot of little contracts as compared to a big one. Clearly what we hired Hucker to do has just, it's enormous, and it's really enormous for one company to manage. I thought last year we talked about breaking that contract up, and I've heard nothing about it since then.
Commissioner Hardesty, let me get back to you after I've had a chance to talk to our impact reduction manager. I do believe there was a capacity issue first and foremost. We know we've got several crews out right now, and I don't know that many other vendors have the both equipment needed to adequately service the any part of the city. But if I could, let me get back to you to your question.
Thank you, Carmen. Let me just say that I think that there's some, it may just be that we have some contracts that are just for garbage cleanup, right?
Okay.
We have Hucker for the solid waste that has to be cleaned up, or,
right.
Cleaning the toilets. I just don't want us to just assume that we have one company that can do it, because that's simply not true.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks for the questions. Any other questions before we dive into challenges? I don't want to preempt anybody. I'm not looking at the hands raised. Sorry. Okay.
Nobody. Frida actually has her hand.
Go ahead, Frida.
Oh, just following up on Commissioner Hardesty, it seems like if it is just the cleanup of trash that's on the sidewalks, because I'm seeing a lot of it in East Portland and the tents aren't there anymore, that you could break it in and help our minority businesses that might have a large truck vehicle to collect and dispose of, and give an opportunity to some of those smaller businesses that are in need of work right now. Just a comment.
Thanks, Frida. Many of the city's greatest challenges, as we know well, will extend beyond the 2021-22 fiscal year. I've talked with each council member individually about some of these challenges, but I think it's important for you to hear them now in the context of the budget process, particularly as the local economy could take several years to recover. Our spectator venue and internal service funds are drawing down reserves to absorb the impact of COVID. We mentioned spectator venues a little bit earlier, but I want to talk about this just briefly. I asked staff to put links to these funds in the chat for community budget advisors and others if they're interested in learning more. But what we're doing is just not sustainable, and we are planning on crafting a plan for post-recession options for council's consideration. In the spirit of Commissioner Hardesty's comment earlier around long-term risks to the city, we're doing everything we can to get through this year and next, but we are going to have to prepare some hard choices for how to rebuild reserves and internal service funds and the spectator fund. As I noted earlier, we have exhausted our cut scenarios, and I think the previous team of directors also mentioned this. We face some pretty consequential trade-offs over the next couple of years. I want council to know that in a meeting a few days ago with Bureau Director colleagues, I did say clearly to them that future budgets on this trajectory will most likely result in decentralizing some current functions that the Office of Management and Finance does. In short, we would face some pretty hard trade-offs about pushing current workload onto what we call the customer bureaus. I want council to know that we're going to have to talk about that if the recovery is as long as it could be. It's not an easy message to deliver, but I think it's important that you know that the challenges are pretty steep ahead of us. Future of the workplace. This is more interesting and has some more positive connotations. Everybody knows organizations around the world are rethinking the future of the office workplace in particular. We've witnessed that telework can be effective to some level for a significant amount of employees' time. As much as I wish that we were in City Hall right now, I know we would be doing different and deeper work. We can do some of our work remotely. Many bureaus are interested in adjusting their physical footprint and re-examining who and what work can be remote and for how much of each week. This year, we've already started to chart the path forward, including the impact on the city's costs, operations, and importantly, our culture. We will be coming to council later this spring with a proposal for how to move forward. We're also preparing for investments in security. No surprise to the elected officials in this meeting. We have to do a lot of work to protect people, places, and technology in our changing world. Both facilities and employee security have been compromised over the past year. Again, I just think it's important to say, even though we've all read about it or heard about it or experienced it, heightened hostility towards governments and public employees on both the national and local level is a sea change. And we've all seen these stories about security breakdowns and the erosion of social norms. What's less visible is the verbal harassment that city staff regularly experience in the field and the hateful emails that staff at all levels receive for simply doing their jobs. We have a nascent security program that's under-resourced, but we're working our best to implement a new enterprise access control system to replace our current outdated system. That means technology and tracking people going in and out of buildings in a respectful way that honors people's privacy. And with the tremendous amount of remote work, lastly, I want to make sure council understands we're going to have to continue to be very mindful of the threat to our cybersecurity. We work on that daily, and it's going to just increase. So with that, we look forward to questions and comments about OMF's requested budget or any other issues we've raised in this presentation. Lastly, thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you, Tom. Colleagues, any further questions? Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question about security. What we learn is that someone who shows up at City Hall who has a gun in their bag, they are told to go put their gun in the car. I thought that was a stupid rule. And I'm just wondering, as we're updating security protocol, what additional things should we be doing if someone shows up at City Hall with a weapon?
Carmen, you want to take that first? Do you want me to do it? Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, Commissioner Hardesty, if someone does have a legitimate concealed weapons permit, that's the best we can do is ask them to go away, put the weapon in somewhere secure, and then they can come back then.
But actually, you don't even check to find out if they have a concealed weapons permit.
We do check with Portland Police Bureau, and they can confirm for us in a fairly quick manner whether or not they do have a legitimate concealed weapons permit.
Well, let me just say that in the incident that happened in my office, I was told that they did not call the police to determine whether or not that person said they had a concealed weapons permit, which is a little different than verifying it.
I will follow up on that, Commissioner.
Yeah, and thanks, Carmen. And Commissioner, I remember this incident, and it was one of the incidents that very early on, and I believe your tenure, we started to think about actually creating a security program. So I just wanted to be completely above board with people about that. This is a different era for us, like a lot of local governments. I was in a meeting with 50 administrators from the largest cities in the country. Everyone's struggling with this. It's not an excuse for us, but I'm just telling you, it is a new era in terms of what major cities are facing day to day with elected officials, staff, visitors. We drastically need to up our game here, and we hear you, and we're going to do that.
Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. It's very helpful to see this, and I appreciate the links in the chat for those of us who weren't here last year for similar discussions. My question is about the arts community and how it's been deeply impacted by the need to cancel thousands of arts events over the last year. What are we doing to support the arts community, and are we doing everything that we can to support them in this next year?
Thanks, Commissioner Rubio, for the question. Yeah, I think it has been just painful to watch for all of us that enjoy so much of the diverse and wonderful art that we have in the city. I am pleased that our city, state, and federal governments have stepped in with initial investments, at least, to offset a significant portion of revenue losses. As you, I'm sure, know, as our arts commissioner, the arts organizations are hoping to carefully return to theaters and galleries this fall. It's important that we maintain our investments in the regional arts and culture councils so that RAC can continue providing the same level of grants and public art purchases. And our budget request includes no cuts to RAC. Whether or not we're doing enough, it's going to be hard to see that we're ever going to be able to do enough, but we do have a fair amount of funding through our contract through RAC over the next year to help us acquire more artwork from Black artists, Indigenous artists, artists of color, to also convene community conversations about our monuments, which I'm anticipating people are also going to be asking about, and also finally launch a cultural planning process that will define the city's vision and future goals for arts and culture going forward. And related to what people have gone through over the past year and a half, we think that is more important than ever. So we're open to ideas of how to strengthen that work, but that's what's going on.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Tom Reinhardt. I want to first say I really like your visuals. It's wonderful to see big pictures and not a lot of text to read. It's more engaging. So thank you. You mentioned something about decentralizing, and I got confused on where you were going with that. I always think when you're in a budget challenge, you streamline, you centralize, and then I thought I heard you say something different than that. So please educate me.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Commissioner Ryan. When I mentioned at the outset that the Office of Management and Finance was the creation of a really amazing and Herculean effort by Mayor Cass and her staff during her tenure as mayor, the work really did remain incomplete. And it's not popular to say in some settings in the city, but we actually do have employees lodged in various spots in various bureaus and offices that do work that we also do. That's just because of our form of government. We would be put in the position in our general fund areas, so Bureau of Human Resources and procurement in particular in the Office of Management and Finance, that if we continue to be asked to take cuts, and I'm not making a judgment on that, that just might be the reality we are in. We were taking general fund reductions even when we had record revenue collection. So we anticipate the next couple of years we will be asked to take cuts. We will have to offer at some point some cuts that would require us to say we can no longer do X and Y service, and bureaus will have to pick that up. That's what I mean, Commissioner. At some point, it's not value add anymore. For example, us to do a service in human resources that we won't do well. And we are already having pains, some pain points with bureaus around being able to deliver at the level bureaus want us to deliver at. And that's not a comment on our people, that's a comment on the capacity. So I hope that's helpful.
It's very helpful. I really appreciate that. Thank you for that answer.
Andrea Peluso, then Commissioner Maps.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. You mentioned in the security section threats against staff at all levels. And I wonder if you could say more about what efforts are being taken to ensure security for some of our frontline staff at the city. That's a concern. And then there was also a comment that you made about this not being sustainable, and I was unclear what that meant, if it was workload issues for existing staff and also current staffing levels as we look at future budget forecasts.
Yeah, Carmen, can you take question one and I'll take question two, and good to see you even just on Zoom, Andrea.
Thanks for the question. We've done several things, and first of all, we've heard reports of our city employees being assaulted, harassed, threatened across the board, almost in all bureaus. So a few things we've done: we've encouraged people to use a buddy system, so always go in pairs if they have to be out in public. We've actually encouraged a lot of our city vehicles to be plated over with a blank slate, so the vehicles that people are driving don't readily identify as City of Portland, because we are seeing a lot of vandalism to our city vehicles. We've encouraged people to really limit their social profile, and in some cases actually scrub their identity online, because they're receiving threats on their personal mobile devices and at their home addresses. We've done training for them on how to stay safe and knowing who to contact if they are receiving threats. Admittedly, we have a lot more to do, and our employees don't feel safe when they come to work. And so we are going to be establishing additional security measures for when we are ready to bring people back into our buildings. But those are just some of the things that we've done to address the concerns we're hearing from our city employees.
And part two of Andrea's question, my mention of sustainability in terms of what we do. for the people that I'm lucky enough to work with, I think you know this, we really want to take on a lot of what the city needs to do. I'm really energized by the work. We love it when council asks us to do hard, complex, gnarly projects. But we have come up to the point last year that we've had conversations around, can we take on any more? Our credibility matters. Your credibility matters. If we don't deliver on the things you're asking us to do, and I'm thinking about the community safety transformation or online permitting or 311, or we're just getting to that point where we're going to have to say, and it's going to be very hard for me to say that to any of our 6 elected officials, but that's what I was meaning, Andrea. At some point soon, we're going to have to do that.
Commissioner Maps.
Thank you. I'd like to start out first by thanking all the staffs and all the bureaus who have presented today. It's been a really helpful overview of both the work that you do and the needs that you need. And as a council, I'm sure we're going to try really hard to get you the resources that you need. But today I want to ask an OMF question specifically around the funds that you invest in our houselessness programs. One of the things I'm trying to figure out between the work session we had last night and your budget overview today is how our spending from OMF on houselessness relates to our efforts over in the joint office. And like, why isn't all of this in the joint office? Like, I'm trying to figure out where these lines are drawn and should be drawn.
That's a great question. Which one of us should take that? I'm thinking Jessica, Carmen, and I all will probably have an answer to that. I think part of it, the history is important, and I live with a historian, so maybe that's why I'm answering the question. When the Hooker program was formed, I know it was formed in Mayor Hales's office originally, and then and this isn't a judgment on that time. I think that people were doing the best they could. There wasn't any real clear understanding of where the best place for it was and is in city government. So Office of Management and Finance took it. I don't know if we've really explored all the budget intersections that you mentioned, Commissioner Maps, unless Jessica wants to opine on that. But I do think, as we stage out of various crises and actually can do some face-to-face work, we appreciate the question. We should probably talk about what the future of a lot of these funds that Portlanders would see in their mind is commingled, right? And that we have in different aspects of city and county government and in different funds and different services.
Thanks. Anyone else want to take a swing at that one?
I would just chime in. Sorry, I'm toggling between audio issues. That I think the original construction when it was created by then Mayor Hales was the thinking around the distinction was that the joint office was providing services and that the program, the impact reduction program is working on the impacts related to houselessness, but it's not providing a direct service to the population experiencing houselessness. Now, I know that the current program manager, Lucas Hillier, actually does connect regularly with the joint office, and we are working together to make sure that those services are coordinated in the best of our ability. But the primary function, and Carmen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the primary role is addressing impacts related to houselessness.
Okay.
Yeah, it's somewhat unfortunate that the word homeless is in the program because the program really isn't set up to address the houselessness crisis directly. It really is there to mitigate the impacts of the houselessness crisis, primarily through trash and garbage collection, but other support services to the homeless population.
Thank you.
Lucas, did you want to do a better job than any of us have done answering that? You run the program.
Yeah, so thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Maps. This question does come up quite a bit. And I think at the time of the formation of the Joint Office of Homeless Services, there was a lot of unease within the city bureaus, specifically the property owning bureaus, for this service to live outside of city government, in a shared joint county, office, because primarily what we started out doing many years ago when this was a very small under $1 million a year program was providing a very specific work task for and on behalf of property owning bureaus, and over the years as we have grown, I think we have found that our job is easier when we're coordinating with those like more upstream kind of solution oriented social service providers, and making sure that our work doesn't interfere with their work, but we're also able to meet, basic public safety and sanitation standards in city, in public spaces.
Lucas, before you go, does that arrangement work, or do you think, or is this something that we should think about?
Well,
or is the system working?
Thank you again. I think, there's a little unease with some of the work that the Joint Office does in close coordination with social service providers. Having this function and this kind of a program live within that office would maybe hinder some of their efforts with some of their service providers, right? Because it's ultimately, at times we have to ask people to move so that we can scrub down the area, right? And I think that function living in that office just makes folks over there a little uneasy.
If I could put in a plug, Lucas and his team did a very good job, I thought, on OPB's Think Out Loud not too many weeks ago. So I'd encourage people, if they want to know more about the program in particular, I thought it was a really good back and forth conversation, and went into significant depth about the program and not only its history, but what it actually does. Commissioner, did that answer your question before I go to Commissioner Hardesty? Thanks, Commissioner Mapps. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. My question is actually more about OMF, Lucas, so I appreciate your response. And I know we're going to talk a bit more about, again, how we can take some of the load off. And I would say, because Lucas' team does sweeps before the pandemic, there's that attachment. So there's some fear that if Hucker was in Commissioner Ryan's portfolio, that there would be a lot of pressure on Commissioner Ryan because of the work that Lucas' team does. But I do think it's worth a conversation. I certainly know it doesn't belong in OMF. I'm just not sure where it belongs in the city of Portland. So I do think it's a very worthwhile conversation. So I appreciate us having it today. But my question is more about OMF. And Tom, can you say no? And I asked that question because, of course, many of us are very strong personalities, and we come to you with harebrained ideas. We say, "Hey, Tom, go figure this out," right? And so Tom, can you say no to us? I mean, you have to be able to say, "I have the capacity, and I cannot take on another mind-bending exercise."
Yeah, listen, Commissioner Hardesty, if the no's haven't reached you, then your staff is already doing a good job in terms of.
Yeah, because I never hear no from you. So if you're saying no, I don't know about it.
Yeah, we do say no. What I was referring to is, some of the ones we've been given or asked to do are just mission critical, right? So I think I was trying to articulate is we're getting to a point where we're going to have to sequence or postpone or pause some ones that I would even call, some really mission critical initiatives that we have to do. Of course, we work through with staff. I wouldn't call them harebrained because I come up with 7 to 10 a week that are fulfill that category. But there are always ideas that we say, not the highest and best use of our resources now. I was trying to really outline, I don't want to be in a position where I have to say a city priority has to be paused or delayed, and we're getting there.
Well, and that gets to the core of my question. So there are things that OMF does today that is not mission critical, that if you stop doing it tomorrow, no one would probably even notice. So my question is, what are those things that currently you have a responsibility for in your portfolio that if they were moved or if they just didn't happen, life would go on, especially if we're thinking about this critical time that we're in with limited budget resources and facing cuts as we move into the next budget cycle. I started saying this in jest, but I really mean this seriously. We need you to tell us, right? What is it within your bureau that it went away? It would not affect our core mission or the direction that we're headed post-pandemic.
Yeah, that's a longer conversation. I appreciate you raising it. We will think about it and get back. I think the definition of mission critical or compliance, or there's all these different things that the city has made a real strong decision to do or passed in a resolution that we would have to discuss. That, of course, is separate from just basic technology, revenue and finance and HR work. But yeah, we will follow up with you on that, Commissioner. I'll make sure the whole council gets an analysis of that.
We got 5 minutes to spare, Mayor.
All right, well, Tom, anything else for the good of the order?
I just want to say that in the afternoon session, I thought I'd have to hold up my book and say, where are your notes? You always say you have the note. I didn't have to goad anybody. Thank you so much for being engaged. It's hard to do in this environment. We really appreciate the time, and any follow-up, please just email or call.
Thanks, colleagues. Director Kennard, do you want to put in the last word?
Sure. Well, again, I'd also like to extend my thanks to everybody. This is a challenging afternoon session. Tom sent me a graphic that was pretty alarming about people's attentions dropping right at the time of our work session. So thank you also for your engagement. I want to ask one request is if there is any sort of follow-up, please pass it through coordinate with our office as well, so we can make sure that the community budget advisors and all of the work session participants all get the same responses and information. And then in closing, I'll just say that our next work session is on Tuesday, and we'll be focusing on addressing the urgent unmet housing need. So it should be another interesting and very important conversation.
Very good. Thank you to all of our Bureau leaders and staffers. Thank you to my colleagues, and thank you to our budget advisors. Well done. Good session. We are adjourned.